It's simple, really. Great stories with a good cup of tea. It's the Tea with Mike Show. Welcome to today's episode of the Tea with Mike Show. Advaith Kumar, a podcast host, marketing student, and a Chicago Bears fan. How's it going today, man?
It's going really, really, really well, Mike. I'm really excited to be talking to you. I think I first came across you in your call with Gary V. You got the unique chance to talk to him on Tea with Gary V. And usually I tend to follow, everyone who comes on a show. And luckily I came across you and our paths crossed, and I'm actually really, really lucky. Like, I would say, out of all the people who come on Gary's show, there's only a few that I'm really close with, and I think it's you, Ginger, Jeremiah, Dom Jackson, and a couple other of my friends. But yes, it's just really cool to see that Gary V community expanding into like a friendship and something more than uh I guess a call with Gary V, to put it at that.
Well, thank you so much, man, and likewise to you. It's life has a funny way of doing what life does in that sense. Like you can't always control every moment, but sometimes, like the example that you just gave, you just have to embrace it, and it's cool that we got connected, and I'm excited to grow our friendship and hopefully do some more collaborations as we support each other through whatever we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on again. Just wanted to reiterate that.
So, do you want to start by telling us where you grew up and where you now call home?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up here in like the Chicagoland area, and I think growing up for me is different from other people, um, because I grew up with a lot of health issues and a lot of surgeries. So I think that really shaped me into the person that I am today. Because I think that I often talk about how I'm an outlier because I'm doing my podcast and my other stuff, but lately I've been thinking I've been an outlier even since when I was a kid. Like having those health issues is not something a lot of kids have. So I think that's kind of something that made me into an outlier. And I guess right now, as you said before, I'm a student at a local college near me called North Central College, and I'm studying marketing, and it's going really well. I actually had made a dean's list in 2021, so my first year at North Central. So that's something
Congrats,
that's
man.
really
That's
cool.
cool.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's going really well.
So, what was some of your favorite things to do, kind of growing up?
Um, I would say maybe by far my favorite thing was cars. Now I'm not really big on cars, but I used to be really big on cars back in the day. Um, I have a ton of cars. Like there's like a big cupboard over there, like a big cupboard just full of cars, and um, there's like a car here. So I guess I still like cars to this day, but cars have been a really cynical point of my childhood. So that's something that I grew up loving.
Okay, cool. So, tell us a little bit more about that. Why were cars so important to you? Tell everybody that's going to be watching or listening to this a little bit more. Because I sort of know the story, but I want you to tell it to everyone that's going to be tuning in.
Yeah. I think just me having all those health issues, I think I found a lot of comfort playing with cars, and I remember like from a very young age, I knew what cars are what cars. So I think in Canada, you guys have the same cars as us. I don't know how it is in London, but you guys have Toyotas, you have Jeeps, and all that good stuff, right?
Oh, for sure.
And
All of the regular brands of vehicles. Absolutely.
yeah, so like from a very young age, I knew what cars were Jeeps, what cars were Toyotas, what cars were Hondas, what cars were Chevys, what cars were BMWs, etc., etc. And I just liked cars from a very young age, and that's something that I think I found comfort in. And yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's just my how. That's just why I love cars, I guess.
Talk to us a little bit about visiting lots of car showrooms.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit weird because for most people, I don't know if you drive, Mike, but for most people, they don't find going to a dealership very fun. They think it's boring and lame. But for me, going to a dealership is just so exciting because the fact that you can walk into like the showroom where they have all those cars and stuff, it's just so cool. Like you can go inside them, you can go and see, what the new cars are, and it just gives me like a certain amount of dopamine release. That's really cool. And I live in Chicago, and they have one of the biggest auto shows, kind of like I guess Alberta or Toronto where you live. And I think I used to go there like every single year when I was a kid, and just really cool going to the auto show, seeing all those cars. For someone who likes cars like me, I think that's one of the best experiences for someone to experience.
Cool, man. And finally, on the car front, what's your favorite car? Like favorite make?
Um, I would say I like the fast cars like Lamborghinis. I also like SUVs like a Toyota 4Runner. Right now I would say my two favorite cars are a 4Runner and of course like any guy likes I like the G Wagon and uh like the Hummer and there's this new Ford truck called the Ford Bronco. That's pretty cool too, so I like that too.
Fantastic, man. And so, not a huge car lover myself, but if I was choosing a car, it would probably be a quick car, and I would probably go with a Ferrari. And the only reason why I would go with a Ferrari is because when I was growing up, I watched quite a bit of Formula One and Michael Schumacher, and out of all of the cars that were racing around the track, I was drawn to the red of the Ferrari. When did you first become interested in football and the Chicago Bears? And before you answer the question, just want to emphasize for the European listeners and viewers that we're talking about American football and not soccer.
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much for asking this. So, when I was in high school, my freshman year, I didn't have a lot of friends. I had a few friends who were on the football team. So, because of that, I really wanted to be a part of that football team because, it's just friends and being around people who kind of really helps you and really helps that high school experience. And I got the unique chance to work with my high school team due to my adopted PE teacher who helped me work with them. And from there, my knowledge just expanded. Like I basically went to every single football game from my freshman year to my senior year, and I supported all my friends there. And some of them, I'm still friends with them. Some of them are my greatest friends to this day, and they're probably listening to this podcast. But yeah, football has been just a really big point in my life. And as in terms of Chicago, um, I would say growing up in Chicago, anyone who's been to Chicago or anyone who lives in Chicago knows that sports are a big thing here, and especially the Bears. So, being someone that liked football, my mind just went immediately to liking the hometown team, liking the Bears and stuff. So that's kind of where that stuff really, really came from. And yeah.
Now, have you been to some Chicago Bears games?
So I have not been to any Chicago Bears games. I would like to go someday. And it's really funny that you asked this because as we're speaking right now, there's like a certain debate over Chicago Bears fans like, hey, do we move from the current field we have in Chicago at Soldier Field, which is right by Lake Michigan? Like it's really cool. I've been around there a few times, or did we move to another place called Arlington Heights? So it's a really big thing, and I just really wish I had that experience to talk about it on my YouTube channel. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but I would like to go someday and really experience a Chicago Bears football game.
And if you were picking one thing about the whole football sport that sparks your curiosity and your interest in it, what would it be?
I think one of the biggest, I'll take this in a different way, but I
Sure.
think one of the biggest things that I've kind of learned from being on that football team was that brotherhood that you have with the other players. And I think I'm really lucky to say that the players who are on that team, they really liked me being on those sidelines. I don't know if it helped them or not, but I think they really loved seeing me on those sidelines, and they liked it when I came. Um, and we just had like a really a close friendship, like with me and all those guys, and we still have it to this day. And I'll never forget it. Our senior year, um, the last game, we were in the playoffs, and that we were almost at that state championship game, and unfortunately we lost, and it was really sad. And I remember like all those guys being sad, and it was sad to see us lose. But they were I think like I maybe about them a certain amount of comfort or something, but that's the biggest thing with football, that brotherhood and being around all those guys, I think.
Cool, cool, man. And so, obviously, now we've established that you're obviously an avid Chicago Bears fan. And I guess before we move on a little bit, who's your favorite Chicago Bears player?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So, in Chicago, we recently drafted this rookie quarterback named Justin Fields. And Mike, I'm sure if you've seen on my stories how I constantly post about him. So yeah, probably Justin Fields right now. I think he's a really big part of Chicago. And, honestly, Justin Fields is also a really big part of my YouTube channel. I think like most of the videos that I make are about him, and he's really helped my channel grow. So I'm extremely thankful that we were able to draft him. So yeah.
What is it that draws you to this particular person or player? Because you mentioned obviously he just joined the Chicago Bears, but you must have seen him somewhere else. So how did you first hear about him?
Sure. So Justin Fields went to this football powerhouse called Ohio State University, and they're one of the best programs in football. They have a really big team around him. And growing up, Justin Fields was a five-star recruit. Basically, what that means is he was one of the best football players in the country and one of the top football players in the country. And I think like only like I don't know how many recruits are five stars, but it's only a few. So he was really, really good at what he did. He went to Georgia, another football powerhouse, and then transferred actually to Ohio State. So he was like a really big star. And I think that, I speak for many Chicago Bears fans and I say this. In the past, we've kind of struggled with that quarterback position. And that quarterback position is one of the most important positions in football. And I would say that getting Justin Fields really solidified that, hey, maybe Chicago Bears have found a real quarterback, because in the past, we've struggled finding a really good quarterback. So Justin Fields kind of changes that, and he's just a star. He's just he's just a kind of that star coming to your team that I think that really drove me to him.
Obviously, this ties, as you sort of alluded to a little bit, your YouTube channel. So, what inspired you to start your YouTube channel about them, and what are your plans for continuing to grow the channel?
Yeah. So basically, what inspired me to start my YouTube channel was people like you, other content creators, right? Seeing all these content creators putting out content out there and getting views kind of really drove me to YouTube. And I guess for YouTube, I don't know if you've seen this with your channel. There's more growth to be involved in YouTube than with podcasting. Because with YouTube, I think it's easier to go viral than a podcast, and I don't think podcasting is there just yet. When you can go and post a podcast, and boom, it'll hit like 1K views in like a few days, right? Um, that's the thing that really drew me to YouTube, that instant way to go viral. And going back, so my YouTube channel is basically about the Chicago Bears. So that's another thing that drew me to do, because I have all these takes, all these topics that I want to talk about with the Bears, and I think that really drew me to my YouTube channel. Sorry.
That
So
was cool, man.
so yeah. So I think the next part of your question was, where do I see it going from here? So
Yeah.
basically, I think you and me are like, right? When you're doing a podcast, you're telling a story. You're telling someone's story from point A to where they are right now. That's what I love about doing my podcast, like talking to someone, getting their story, right? Like, for you, going off on a tangent in a little bit, like, wouldn't you say that one moment that really changed your life was talking to Gary? Because I think that brought you so many eyes, so many people knew who Teawithmike was, and now you're probably one of the biggest people in the Gary Vee community. Like, people recognize you, right? I think that,
Maybe
yeah,
I don't really think about it like that, but maybe that's true from an outside perspective.
yeah, and that's kind of what really drove me. That's really driving me to take my YouTube channel where I want to take it. That's storytelling. That's talking about how a certain player got to where they are today. And I'll give this in like Gary Vee's terms, because I think a lot of people who are fans of Gary Vee who listen to your podcast, you know, what I want to do on my YouTube channel is basically like this. So like I'll give you an example in terms of Gary's terms, like how Gary Vee went from a kid in Soviet Russia, to going from a kid who moved to New York, didn't have a lot of money, grew up um, in New Jersey, where his dad was working as a worker at um, a wine shop, to owning that wine shop, and to Gary, working as a kid, helping his dad, being a worker, being an employee at his company, to owning Wine Library, to starting VaynerMedia, and to becoming the person that he is today. So what I want to do is basically tell that story over to Chicago Bears players. Right now I'm working on a video about Darnell Mooney, who's another Chicago Bears player. I'm talking about how he went from like a 2-star recruit into becoming one of the stars of the Chicago Bears. So that's kind of what I kind of want to do. I'm really telling my story of a player on how they went from point A to point B.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea, man. Do the Chicago Bears have an official podcast?
Um, I'm not too sure. They have a lot of other podcasts, but I don't know if they have their own podcast, but they have a lot of people covering that team that I've actually talking to in the past. That I'm actually talking to actually, but yeah, I wouldn't say they have an official podcast, but they have like official media and stuff.
Okay, so today's tea fact for the episode is: in many parts of the world, tea is an important part of the day and an expression of hospitality. And that comes from factretriever.com/tfact.
Interesting. That's interesting. I think that it's kind of I don't know if you agree with this, Mike, but I think it's kind of unique to see how different cultures incorporate tea. Like in London, maybe you could tell me about this, but in London, it's usually maybe around the evening that most people have it. I know you have it more than most people do, because you're a huge tea fan. And then here in America, or here in America slash Canada, like that more kind of that would here in America slash Canada, I think it's more as a leisure. For example, like if you compare tea in London versus tea at Starbucks, it's vastly different. It's they have sweet tea, they have green tea. Like I haven't had tea at Starbucks, but it's different. It's kind of cool to see how different cultures use it. And then in India, it's different too. Like people have in the evening, but I think like it's different ingredients and stuff. So yeah, what do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Good question. It's like I'm on your podcast. No, so I would say, obviously, tea originated in countries like India. So it's obviously got a strong tradition. They have many varieties of tea that are grown in places like India, which obviously naturally gives you more exposure to different types and different varieties and different methods for producing the tea, from steeping the tea to how long you leave the tea leaves to dry, all of those types of things. And then obviously that tradition, to my understanding, obviously spread into Europe, and obviously if we're talking specifically about England, it became a strong tradition that started as a luxury item, a bit like alcohol and those types of things, and only the rich and the upper class could afford tea. I think this is like the 17th century. Don't quote me. From that tradition came things like afternoon tea, where people used to stop what they were doing, like not necessarily in the evening, but like mid-afternoon, late afternoon. They would have tea and they'd mix it with like strawberries and cakes and scones like that, and it was supposed to be, as you said, a point of leisure. And actually a staple of where lots of good conversations probably started, and so obviously over the years it's become a more everyday thing and that type of thing. And then if you're flipping it to North America, I'll speak at least a little bit to Canada because I don't fully know what it's like in the States. Obviously you got things like Tim Hortons and Starbucks, but I would say they're just more franchise and just like another restaurant or another establishment that serves food and drink. People don't really think about the traditions, and most people are definitely not there for the conversation. It's like they're grabbing their coffee on the way to work. If they couldn't care less who's behind them in the drive-through or the person serving them, and that type of thing. Not necessarily saying that's wrong, but I think it carries different weights in different countries, is how I would kind of summarize.
Yeah, I think it's like more commercialized.
Oh, for sure.
Like there's no culture behind it. Like if you think about Starbucks, people just go in there, they grab their tea, then they go. Like I mean, Starbucks is different. Here in the States, they don't really have too many Tim Hortons. But I'll just speak from Starbucks since you know what that is. I think like Starbucks is more commercialized, right? People just go in there, they grab their tea, they grab their coffee, they leave, and the the way that the need for conversations has gone away, and I feel like that's something we need in today's world. Like we need more people talking about, we need more people to talking to each other, right? And I think that too many times we get often mad at someone. You know, we look at Twitter, we get triggered or something. Like we don't have that conversation about having that healthy conversation, that healthy debate. You know, I think in politics, especially, you know, that's key. You know, you don't really see that conversation happening, and I don't know. Maybe it's time to like find a way to make Starbucks from a commercial brand into a brand where, you know, you can go in there, get your coffee, have a conversation with someone, meet people, right? When we do something like this at Starbucks, you know, live podcasts and stuff. So, you know, I'm just really curious to see what happens next in this whole world.
Me too, and that's a conversation that we can expand on at another time. In your bio, you mentioned that you have a learning difference called ADD, which I think is often now referred to as ADHD. And followers of the Tea with Mike show will know from my recent show that I did with Nick Clavier that I also have some learning differences and got some dyslexia tendencies and ADHD. So can you tell us a little bit, Kumar, about what ADD is, how you discovered that you had learning differences, and then how you feel they kind of impacted you and also your perspectives on life?
Yeah, so I think we can both relate to this, and I've actually talked to Nick before. He's come on my podcast. Great guy. He's also a Bears fan. But um, so when I was younger, I think that I was diagnosed with developmental delays. And I don't remember the exact moment when I was diagnosed with ADD because I was maybe like 4 or 5. I don't remember that at all. But I know in like elementary school, I remember, you know, sometimes I would go and often meet with like an occupational therapist or like a PT therapist, and just taking time out of my day and them helping me grow and helping them with my disability and helping me be on par with other kids. And then for middle school, that kind of fastened up a little bit. That kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but that kind of got a little more intense. So yeah, that's when I got like an IEP. I don't know if you know if you have an IEP or if you know what that is, but it's like an individualized plan to help people with disabilities succeed in a classroom, like getting extra time on tests, which
I got
I
extra
think
time on
maybe you
tests.
have. Yeah, extra time on tests.
It was so nice.
Um, yeah, it is nice. Extra time on tests and a bunch of other stuff, and I think that having ADD has helped me get those things. But what I wanted to take this is that um in high school too, that kind of helped me out a little bit. Like I got extra time on tests and all that good stuff, and then in college extra time on tests and all that good stuff. But early on, when I had my disability, maybe I was like a bit embarrassed that I had the disability, and I would often kind of hide it. But in high school, especially towards like my junior and my senior year, and even my sophomore year, I think that I just grew to be just like myself for who my disability is. Because my disability, it doesn't define me. It makes me to the person that I am today. And being ADD, I mean, I'm sure you know what this is like, Mike. Like you'll be in class, it'll be really boring, and
Yes.
your mind will drift a little bit, and you just can't pay attention. You get so many ideas, and that's the thing with ADD. Like, I think that people who have ADD come up with some of the most creative ideas. I mean, look at me and you, right? Me and
Exactly.
you have come up with the idea to start a podcast. I know people who don't have disabilities who haven't really able to do that. That's kind of something that sets us apart and something that I really like. And sometimes it is hard having a disability, and this as much as I do. Like sitting in there, like taking a test for 4 hours is not fun at all. But it is what it is, and we have to do what we have to do to help us succeed. So yeah.
Obviously, that I think that learning differences kind of bring with them their own strengths and their own challenges. So, what do you feel are the strengths and challenges that your learning difference has given you?
Yeah, I'm sure you can agree with this, but sometimes it's kind of harder to learn something. I don't know. Sometimes for me, it takes multiple tries to learn something. This past semester, I took like a finance class, and it was really hard for me to understand that subject and to really get what I was doing. It took me a couple of tries, but I eventually got to the point and when I was good at it, where I understood it. Um, I think the biggest challenge is that sometimes on your first try that you don't get it, that you need multiple tries. But the good thing is I've been able to use this as an asset, and I've been able to talk to my professors and get the help that I needed. I'm really outspoken. I'm not afraid to ask for help. So that's really helped me with having a disability, because I think some people are scared to ask for help, but I'm not one of those people. I'll ask for help if I need it.
Now you see, at the beginning, I was afraid to ask for help, but as I understood more about dyslexia and ADHD and coming at it from the angle that it has both its pros and cons, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, really helped me shift my mindset into asking for embracing the extra help. Because at first I kind of thought I was a like this wasn't right. I was a failure. Why do I need all of this like extra help? Why? How will people perceive me and stuff? But once I overcame those kind of obstacles, right? And I embraced the help. It changed everything.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think you're totally right, and I think that too often, like people think that they have a disability and they're a failure. But what does Gary Vee says? He says, don't care about what other people have to say about you, and use that failure to make you into success, right? Gary, the market doesn't care if we have a disability. No, nobody really cares if we have a disability as long as you can make an impact. And I think that's something that both me and you have done. And I think that the fact that you're going public on your pod. See, I never knew that you had a disability before coming on
Oh,
this
I'm
podcast.
about I'm about to more. I haven't talked about it in like great lengths of detail, but I feel now more than ever it's as I'm embracing the whole storytelling and conversation, it's only right that I'm upfront, honest, and portraying the real me. If you get what my
Yeah.
drift.
No, exactly. And that's what I like about you. Like, you're so honest and you want to help other people. And I think that maybe me and you have some obligations to help other people with disability. You know, Nick Levere is doing a great thing with this.
He's
He's
amazing.
helping like yeah, he is, and he's helping like other special needs kids to find their voices. You know, what is he doing? He's helping people with special needs find that find that comfort in playing basketball and being recognized in basketball than versus other people. You know, like the NBA, like creating that own league, and he wants to help special needs voices grow. And I think that maybe you and I have that obligation too. Maybe like you and I can inspire other special needs kids to start their podcasts, you know, other
Oh, for
special
sure.
needs kids to have that confidence to do whatever they want and they have achieved in their heads. So I don't know, Mike. I think that you and I are, I think that you and I are going to do some big things in this world. So I'm glad that you're being honest, and I'm glad that you're not afraid to tell the world who you are, because that's what it is in the world. You can't be afraid to be you.
Thanks, man. And everything you just said, I'll reflect back to you also. Do you feel that your peers, family, and friends, especially kind of more growing up, especially probably when you learn when you knew less about your learning challenges, do you feel like they supported you through this journey?
Yeah, definitely my family and definitely my friends. I would say growing up at first, I kind of got bullied because of my disability. And the thing was, I didn't know when I was getting bullied, but now I do. Like, now I know who my real friends are versus my fake friends, and I'm still learning this. So, you know, the people, the real MVPs who have stuck by me and supported me. I'm just so thankful for them, and I'm thankful for you too because you've also been supporting me. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's just
No,
my
no,
answer to it.
no, it does absolutely, and I see a lot of parallels. Even though we come from completely different backgrounds and journeys, I see a lot of parallels in both of our stories. And again, on record, so some of the things you just alluded to. Whilst I wouldn't necessarily classify myself as being uh, bullied, it took me a long time to discover what makes a real friend, and it's better to know a few people well versus knowing everybody, because at the end of the day, at some point in life, they're going to disappear as you move places, people develop different interests, they get in relationships, and so on and so forth. And that's still something that I'm learning to this day. I'm like, I really thought me and this person were like great friends and we hung out lots. In my head, that I'm hanging out with them for the rest of my life, but sometimes that's not how life works out here.
Exactly. I think I've had a similar experience too with one of my friends. The fact I used to think this friend was really, really close to me, and now I kind of realized that this person really doesn't care about me, so it's time to move on from this certain person. So I agree with you fully on that.
So when you were in school, were there other students at your school with physical and learning differences? And how did their approaches to their challenges affect your perspective on your own challenges and your life? I know that's a very wordy question.
No, don't worry about it. Sure, thank you for asking this question. So I grew up against with Special Olympics and also this program called Adapted PE. And for those who listen to Nick's podcast with you, probably are well versed in the Special Olympics world and maybe are well versed in Adapted PE. But growing up with Special Olympics, you see a lot of people with autism, with Down syndrome, with all kinds of physical disabilities, not seeing their disability as something that defines them, but something that makes them into who they are today. I would say that they are inspiring, they're inspirational for them to overcome their disability. And I think the biggest thing is that they're always so happy and so cheerful, and they don't look at race color. They don't look at who you are, what you are. They just want to be your friend and be around you. That's something that I think it's taught me. They have taught me. Sorry. It's also taught me to be more positive. They're always so positive and happy, so that's where my positivity comes from. And yeah, I think that's the biggest things that I've learned from this community that I'm part of.
Some of my favorite memories are talking to people with learning challenges. I think some of the best conversations actually happen when you talk to those types of people. I think partly because I can relate in certain ways, because learning challenges look different across the spectrum, but also they're inspiring, and also that perspective on life makes you ask yourself the important questions. Why am I complaining about, this is hypothetical, why am I complaining that I didn't get enough milk in my tea at Starbucks when someone else has all of these challenges, and yet they're inspirational and they're positive, and I'm like, it really just makes me think about what's actually important in life.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Like seeing what they go through really helps your perspective. Like, why am I complaining about this when they're going through so much, right? Yeah, I mean, you're totally correct. I often see people with cancer and say, wow, they're going through
Mm.
so much, but I'm complaining about this. Yeah, you just hit the nail on the coffin, Mike. Yeah, you're totally right on that. I think life is all about perspective and how you look at it. Do you look at a glass half full, like half full, this is some water, or do you look at it half empty?
Great
So,
cue. It's like we
yeah,
planned this, but we didn't.
yeah, exactly. Or this thing here, do you look at this thing with this snack half full or half empty? I look at it half full. I'm all about perspective and having optimism and stuff.
So, what strategies did you develop when you were at school that helped overcome some of your challenges? And have you continued to use these strategies as you kind of progressed out of school into new situations?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing is that not being afraid to do something. So early on, I mentioned how I was not afraid to talk to my professors. And now I'm not afraid to DM people who I don't know, right? A lot of people, Mike, I'm sure, a lot of people use their Instagram to go and DM girls, right? To slide into DMs, if you know what
It's
I
not what
mean,
I
right?
do. Yes.
But for me, I like to talk to people on the DMs. I like to find people on my podcast to bring them on. One of my goals one day will be to have an NFL player on my podcast. So that'd be an honor. And just not being afraid to shoot your shot. Who cares? What's the worst that can happen, right? So I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned.
talk to us a little bit about how you became interested. I know you've already alluded to Gary Vee, but I want to go beyond Gary Vee a little bit, and I want to know how you became interested in entrepreneurship in high school, and then also the incubator course that you kind of took there.
Of course. So my entrepreneurship story starts with podcasting, actually. Not me starting my podcast, but listening to other podcasts. I think I like to listen to this podcast called How I Built This, and this is where Guy Raz, he basically interviews entrepreneurs and talks to them like how they started their companies and stuff. So that's kind of what really inspired me. And then for the most part, being in that business incubator course and really getting a feel on how to start companies, what an SEO is, how you need to get a lawyer to do all that legal stuff, how to start a company, how to come up with an idea and stuff, really came from that class. And really, me getting into marketing and entrepreneurship too came from that class because I got to start a company. I got to go through that, and I liked it. It was really cool working with a team, making a
That's cool.
difference is what really drew me to entrepreneurship. And then yeah, so basically in that incubator class, I guess me and my friend started this company called Help Me Volunteer. Well, actually before that, we wanted to make like a Fitbit for dogs, and we kind of figured out that this wouldn't really work out because there was already an invention like that, so we had to learn how to pivot. And that's something that I use today. I kind of realized that maybe my podcast might not be working out. I think I'm gonna still go with my podcast, but it taught me to pivot to starting a YouTube channel. And even before that, you know, I unfortunately did not get a job at this place, summer job, and that led me to pivot and to start my podcast. So I think that's kind of what that class taught me, pivoting. So we pivoted it from a dog Fitbit company to a company where we wanted to help people find volunteering opportunities. So that's where that entrepreneurship came from. Then Gary Vee. I'm curious to see how you met Gary Vee, Mike. But for me, one day I was just at my local community college at COD, and I was just watching a random YouTube video about motivation, and after that, when Gary's played, I was like, who is this guy? Why is he sweating so much? This guy must be really, really crazy. But after looking into it, I found who Gary Vee was. And even when I was watching him, I thought, what is this guy's motive? Like, is he trying to sell me a course? What is he trying to do? And then I found out that Gary Vee is one of the most realists out there. He wants to just help people for nothing. And that's kind of really what drew me to Gary Vee. So, yeah.
And so another parallel in our stories is, and I'll tell you the 30-second version. We had a guest speaker when I was in college, read at college, taking media and communications. His name is Jonathan Strom. We've actually become fairly close, lives in the same city. He's been on the podcast. We've done some collaborations, and he's a local entrepreneur, has multiple different businesses, and he actually flew to New York and met Gary Vee in a 4D session. I can't remember the story on how he met him, but when he was speaking to our class on entrepreneurship and stuff, this was like a Thursday afternoon. It was rainy. It was like February, March. It was dark outside, but for some reason I was super intrigued by this particular class. It was like 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, towards the end of the week. You should be thinking about the weekend, or most people would be. And I remember doing a bunch of research. I'm like, what questions am I going to ask him? And one of the questions I asked him, who should I be like looking at or researching or listening to on the internet? And this is very early on. Don't know what a podcast is. Don't know all of these different creative things you can do for yourself. And one of the names that he said was Gary Vee. And then searched him up. Thought he was kind of strange at the beginning, like you. Listened a little bit more, and it just really brought a whole new I guess because we've been talking about it as a theme, a new perspective to my life, and I've just been following that perspective ever since, developing my own stuff and the Tea with Mike show and things like that. Talk to us a little bit more about the Help Me Volunteer company, and what were some of your kind of goals with that company?
Yeah, so basically, I don't know how volunteering works in Canada, but for here in the States, there are two main companies called Feed My Starving Children and Loaves and Fishes that you can volunteer with. So what our goal was to basically provide students and organizations with more volunteer opportunities, provide students with volunteer opportunities other than Loaves and Fishes and Feed My Starving Children, and organizations the way to access these students, the way to have a platform to access these students. So that's basically what it was. Now, unfortunately, I wanted to go through with this idea after college, and we had a lot of people who were interested, but unfortunately, my group did not want to go through, so we didn't go to the next round and actually get funding for our company. So it just kind of ended there. But again, as I mentioned before, that's kind of where my entrepreneurship came from. And right now, one of my goals is to help special needs kids find friends. So that's something that's kind of really that I want to kind of do. Maybe start it with a couple other people. So hopefully this semester I can maybe find a team to do that. I haven't been able to do that due to the pandemic and meeting people and really making this idea happen. But hopefully I can do it this year.
A minute lowdown on it, like what's it called, why you started it, and maybe some plans on how you may keep the podcast as part of your creative journey.
Of course, thank you for asking this, Mike. So my podcast used to be called the King Kumar's podcast, but now it's called the Dreams to Reality podcast, and that basically tells what it's about there. So basically, one of my goals is to help people make their dreams a reality, and I interview multiple people who have done that. So that's something that really drew me to podcasting. And again, I talk to entrepreneurs, I talk to athletes. I know you've had a lot of musicians. I haven't had too many musicians on my podcast. I don't know why, but I should get more musicians on my podcast. But musicians, athletes, and speaking of athletes, that's kind of what I want to take it next. So there's this new thing that got passed in the States called NIL. Basically, that means that now athletes can profit off of their names. So I want to come and bring on some athletes and talk about, hey, what are you going to do in NIL? And I want to kind of interview all those big name athletes. And that's kind of what I want to take it next with my podcast. And then I also want to do 2 podcasts a week. So I want to do one podcast where I do maybe like some storytelling. I talk about how companies got started, talk about some topics, and then maybe like on a Friday or something, have an actual interview podcast out. So that's my goals, Mike. So thanks for asking about it.
So what are some kind of skills you've learned from having a podcast?
And the biggest thing is interviewing. I'm gonna be seeking a job soon, and I think it's like really having a conversation with someone, right? Like what you and me are having right now. I don't know what you work, but having that conversation with someone and talking to them and getting their knowledge, getting to know who they are, is what is kind of something I learned from podcasting. Getting people on your podcast, I recently learned about this something called like the secondary market. There's like 2 kinds of jobs. There are jobs that you see on LinkedIn, and then there are jobs that are hidden jobs, is what it's called. So I think the skills that I'm having right now is going to help me in the hidden jobs market and trying to find one of those jobs that are hidden that not many people know about, because I'm good at networking. I'm good at reaching out to people. So that's something that I really learned from podcasting. Yeah, so thanks for asking that again.
Obviously, we haven't really alluded to it much so far, but obviously, you're taking marketing college. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. So
Okay, no, go for it.
But go ahead.
Just tell us a little bit about how that kind of plays into the big picture. Maybe a little bit more about some of the classes you're taking and that type of thing.
Of course. So again, taking the entrepreneurship class kind of really solidified that I want to do something in business, and just looking at the ones that are in business, accounting, finance. I'm not really good at numbers, so I don't think accounting is for me. Finance, that's something that's interesting to me. That's something that I think I might minor in or double major in. So that's something that's inspiring to me. And for me, just marketing, really getting that creative aspect and making ideas happen and doing some things, traveling, you know, doing some creative things, working with people is what really drove me to go into that. And I think that's what really drove me into marketing, because both of my parents are in like the coding space and they code
Oh,
and
that's
stuff.
cool.
So yeah, and I didn't really want to do that. I want to do something more live. So that's kind of what really drove me into marketing. In terms of classes, I've taken like basic marketing courses. I'm going to be taking a social media course soon. Um, so that'll be fun. I've taken management, I've taken finance, which again I alluded to before. And I'm interested in finance. I like stocks, I like mutual funds, all that good stuff. So yeah, that's that's basically my answer to your question.
Nice, and so it sounds like you're really trying to build up the base foundation of knowledge, and then using some of the things that you learned from that and applying it to your own projects. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, that's 1000% accurate. Yeah.
Perfect. And again, that's sort of what I did. I took a media and communications course. I started the podcast while I was still in college, just because I needed something for a class project, and I guess the rest is history. Most people thought it was a silly idea at the time. I've talked about this before on the podcast, but so they thought it was a terrible idea. They laughed at the idea, but one thing that I guess I've learned over time is if somebody laughs at an idea and gets all telling you reasons why you shouldn't do it, it's probably an indication that you should do it.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't mind me asking, do you do this full time or do you have a job?
Oh, I no, no, I have a part-time job. For now, I started a business more recently, and that type of thing, and so I'm getting closer on the journey and the process to turning it into a full-time gig. So I'm 25 now, so definitely by the time I'm 30, the dream is to do this like full time, the podcast and the business and whatever else that leads to. So working hard towards that. Like 2 years ago, I had nothing, and now I'm at this point in the journey, and I'm confident with the right application that I can definitely get there.
Awesome, man. That's awesome. And that's one of my goals too for the marketing world. Probably to work at a firm, really learning about social media, then starting my own agency or something. So I think we share that same dream. So yeah, thanks. That's interesting.
I just want to kind of close out the episode because you never know who might be tuning in. So in your bio, you mentioned that you want to start a company that helps kids with learning differences to find friends. So kind of what talk to us about what inspired you to come up with this idea, and maybe how
Yeah.
you plan to take, if you know, how you plan to take that idea and turn it into reality.
Yeah, I love what you did there. But so, growing up, I didn't really have a lot of friends, as I mentioned before, and I found one of my best friends through playing through football. So that's what I want to provide to other kids with special needs. And I really want to help them find that friend who will change your life, like my friend did to me. So that's kind of what I want to do. So basically, what my idea is, think Tinder, but for making friends, like Match.com, but for making friends. So like you can get paired with someone around your same location against that same principle of Tinder. And if you guys have similar interests, you guys can go and hang out. For example, like let's say you guys both like tea. Maybe you can go to the local tea shop and have tea and have that conversation. Or
I'd
if you
vibe
like
with that.
American foot, yeah, I think that's something that might be interesting for you. Or like if you like American football and you like the same football team like the Bears and stuff, then you can have that sort of friendship and build upon that and build a friendship. So that's really my goal for that. And again, like I mentioned before, I really want to meet people who are going to make this happen because I don't have any coding experience, and we're going to need to do a lot of coding to make this happen. So that's kind of one of some of my goals, to really finding a team and really building this company. So yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're already doing it, but I strongly encourage you to, at minimum, explore the whole concept in like further detail, to see if it's viable. And you never know it if it's not this, it could totally be something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, I totally get what you mean. Yeah, so that's what I'm kind of trying to do right now, see what's viable and stuff. So yeah.
So obviously today, I would say a theme of the show is definitely perseverance. Definitely a lot of perspective and mindset, really weighing up kind of what's important in the world. And I've loved getting to know you a little bit better, hearing a little bit more of your story. And so I think a great question. Well, no, we'll make this the second last question. What is one piece of advice that you would give to anyone, just based off your own journey and your own experiences, because you've had a lot of unique experiences.
Yeah, sure. So I guess don't be afraid to do something that you love and don't be afraid to go in with that idea. When I started my YouTube channel, I was scared that it might not work out. And a couple of weeks ago, I made a video about Justin Fields, and I didn't really expect that video to do good. But that was one of my most popular videos. It has almost 9,000 views, which is crazy.
That's awesome,
So
man.
don't be
Congrats.
afraid. Thank you, Mike. So don't be afraid to take that risk and to do something that you love is my advice.
So this is a new question that I just started asking recently on certain episodes of the show. Who is one person that you would like to see next on the Tea with Mike show?
Who do I want to see on the Tea with Mike show? Well, Mike, I think you should get like Gary Vee on, someone like Zane, someone like D-Rock on. I would really want to see you talk to them. I know you had Andy Craniac on before, but it would be really cool to see you talk to Zane, to see you talk to Dustin, all those kinds of people. So yeah.
Well, Dustin was on the podcast a very long time. D Rock is what may potentially consider it in the future, and Zayn is super busy right now. But you never know what the future holds, right?
Yeah, but I guess then to answer your question, I want to see a Tea with Mike podcast with Gary Vee. I know we only got that for a brief 5 minutes maybe, or 10 minutes. So I want to see you talk to Gary Vee for like an hour, and I know you were gonna do it, Mike. I know you will. I've been saying this a lot, Mike. I don't know if podcasting is for me, but I know it's for you. I know you're gonna become big. You're gonna become like Joe Rogan one day. Just keep
Thanks, man.
doing it, Mike. I believe in you.
Oh, thanks, man. And what a good way to close out the episode. So, Kumar, thank you so much for being on episode 126 of the Tea with Mike show.
Thank you for having me on, Mike. I'm really excited to network with you and talk to you more.
It's the Tea with Mike show.